I was envious watching your show because, yeah. All I imagined, because I've been dealing with quite repressed, polite British people for so long.
Right.
And I looked at your show and I thought, they're having so much fun blowing things up.
We did have a great time.
Being sexy. I mean, none of these things happen in my world. And I was peering over the fence going, look how much fun they're having.
Come over anytime the water's fine, too.
I'm Mikey O'Connell with The Hollywood Reporter, and welcome to the Producers Roundtable. We have a real murderer's row here today. I'm so excited. First, we have Issa Lopez, True Detective Night Country, Peter Morgan, The Crown, Jonathan Nolan, Fallout, Francesca Sloane of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Jen Statsky of Hacks, and Mr. Zaillian from Ripley. All right, to start things out, between you, you are telling stories of likable sociopaths and assassins, nuclear holocaust, and worst of all, complicated women. What was the last scene that you wrote or filmed that made you or your collaborators genuinely nervous?
Who wants to go first?
Your sigh was the loudest, so I feel like it should start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it's close in the ending, in the closing of the series, and it was like the day before the last day of shooting. And I had to throw Jodie Foster into a very dark tank of water. She uses contact lenses. She's as blind as I am, by the way. And so I had a lot of empathy for a blind woman. And she couldn't use her contacts underwater. So we threw her, and she's such a trooper, and she's a certified diver. And she was like, of course, oh my God, I just made a movie about a woman in the water for ages, but it's her turn to be in the water, and she trained, she was prepared, and when the time comes and you wait a person to sink and not being able to, on their own to come out, and obviously you do have a diver there ready to bring them back, but she sees nothing. And the moment that your body goes into the dark water and it's pulled down, something very primitive kicks in. And I was looking at the monitor, and we really knew each other, and I knew that she was panicking for real, which was great for the shot. But there's this moment of, am I killing a Hollywood legend and a national treasure here? So I get the division between the reaction I want to get and the worry for a friend that you can see struggling, and then you finally say, cut, perhaps too soon, and you run to her. She comes out, and I go like, Jodie, and she's like, yeah, and I go, is everything fine? And she goes, yeah, and I go, you're panicking, right? And she's, yeah, and I go, I'm so sorry, we have to do it again. She goes, yeah. So that was very tense, very, very tense.
Who else?
It's tough to talk about like a joke I was scared to land after almost killing Jodie Foster. This seems significantly lower stakes. I think, we're on Hacks, we're dealing with generational differences, and sometimes Deborah Vance does things that to maybe a younger generation seem unsavory. We did something in the 6th episode of season 3 where she hires little people to dress as elves and deliver her Christmas invitations. And Ava's reaction upon coming downstairs and seeing the auditions for this is screaming no at her. But it's always an interesting thing of us depicting this and wanting to authentically depict how Deborah would think and do things, but also show the other side of it, which is someone going like, wait, is this okay? Is this, so probably that, like always, we're wanting to depict Deborah in the correct, authentic way, but make sure that we're presenting all sides of it. But no one's almost dying, so now I feel fine about
She
it.
was not almost dying. But it did feel like that.
Sure, yeah. I can't swim, so to me, this is almost dying. Yeah.
Jonah, you filmed portions of Fallout in, I believe, an abandoned diamond mine in Namibia. And because there are still diamonds there, I heard you say that everyone on the shoot had to submit to a cavity search.
Body cavity search, that's right.
Yeah, so please tell me about that conversation with your creative partners.
I'm not sure I had that conversation, but we agreed on their behalf. No, it was one of those amazing locations. And I think we were adapting a video game. So we started with the premise that, what do we have to offer? We're taking so many things away from the game, and what we had to offer was reality. So we doubled down on the practical production, which I grew up with. And we'd found pictures of this insane abandoned mine when we were researching Westworld. But they didn't work for Westworld because it's masonry construction. So American West masonry construction doesn't work. I had my first meeting with Todd Howard about the game, walked out with a handshake deal to develop it. And I knew I had one location. And I didn't have a story, didn't have a cast, but we had one location. So we went, and it was on the second day we were shooting there, and it's extraordinary. It looks exactly like Los Angeles if you just strip everything away. The second day we were shooting there, someone walked over and said, no one has ever shot here before. It was an active diamond mine for many, many years. It was a sand mine for a few years, and then they were going to resume diamond mining after we finished shooting. And we were told that there were loose diamonds still just sitting on the rock. So I would call action. We had carefully explained to the crew, we're like, they have spotters on every hill. If it looks like you're trying to carry something out of the mine, you're going to wind up in, they called it the shed, on the way back out. He said, don't wind up in the shed. But I would call action, and I'd be focused on the take, and I'd kind of look over, and you'd see every crew member who wasn't in the shot just kind of sort of looking at rocks, trying to figure it out.
So no one ended up in the shed.
No one ended up in the shed. I'm not sure if anyone wound up with some diamonds. But.
Hopefully no one else has done anything as potentially invasive, but what are some of the absurd lengths you've gone to execute a scene?
I'll talk about that a little bit. I had there's a scene in a sequence in episode 3 of my show that all takes place on water. It's a boat scene. It goes on for 25 minutes. And I had no idea how to shoot something like that. I called people who had. Do you shoot on the ocean? Do you shoot on a dock? Do you shoot in a swimming pool? What do you do? And got different advice from different people. But the idea of shooting a scene that's that long and that is that contained with an actor who I didn't know until we didn't swim, like you, which actually was okay for the scene because he's not supposed to be able to swim. But that sequence, was tricky for everybody, and but I really wanted to try something that was like in real time, that was almost an anti-action scene. It was like seeing every little tiny step in how you're going to get a body from the middle of the boat to overboard. So that took about a week to shoot, and it took about a year and a half to do the visual effects.
Oh, wow.
And I think it will take some therapy for the people watching it. Because I don't think I had ever seen such a brilliant depiction of murder is complicated, getting rid of a body.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have to say this. I have to be a fan for a second. So for my show, for episode 2, my initial idea was actually for John and Jane to have to get rid of a body for the entire episode together as their second date. Mm-hmm. And everyone thought, oh, how gruesome that would be. What I got away with is a ridiculous bathtub scene of them having to crack bones and bodies and trying not to throw up on each other. So when I watched your show, I thought, oh, thank God we didn't do it, because this is how you do something like that. But, I mean, that episode of the whole episode is, him having to get rid of this body. I think it's episode 3, 5.
Well, the boat is 3.
The
The
boat
other one
and
is
then
5.
5.
Yeah.
Yes, episode 5.
Yeah.
They all blew me away, but that
Yeah,
one
yeah.
really, I was like, this is
Thank you.
this is how you actually accomplish that.
Thanks.
But in the same sense, I'm sorry that I'm going to find everybody on this table. Because I've always been a rabid fan of watching TV, but this year even more. All of these shows are incredible, and I had never seen the very physical reaction of of two people that are also making each other almost puke, because it is sickening. It's sickening, and it's incredibly funny, but it's sickening. It was such a brilliant finding, really.
Peter, you got
I
some.
haven't murdered anybody. It's a remarkably peaceful and dull world in central London.
You did get a bit of attention recently for your comments that you weren't really that interested in the monarchy.
Did I say that?
You did.
Well, I mean, it's true.
So when does that happen? Was that from the very beginning, or was that after making a play and a film and 6 seasons and a television show?
I know. It seems silly.
What do you do if you are interested in something?
I know. I'm interested in the predicament, and I'm interested in the anthropology, and I'm interested in the confinement and the struggle and the pressure that it puts on a family. But I'm really grateful to them for helping me write a multi-generational family story, and that's the turn on. If you'd have told me that I'd end up doing this, I'd have probably dropped dead, in advance. Yeah. But I've become, it's not an interest in the royal family. It's an interest in human beings in a predicament and trying to tell the story of a country in the second half of the 20th century. And that's what I wanted to try and understand Britain. And we have this ridiculous relationship with this family, which tortures them. It's our fault. It's not their fault. We torture them. And I wanted to get inside both our problem with them and their problem with us, and their problem with it, and our problem with who we are in Britain. And they seem to be that's the family through which to explore who we are.
In that fascination of predicaments, though, I know you have this, I know the show has ended, and you have this rule about like not wanting to run too close to current history, but you have estranged brothers, you have this wild fascination with Kate and Meghan, you have a monarchy that seems to be very fragile in the wake of Queen Elizabeth's death. Do you think at all at night, like when you're lying in bed, about like where you might go with these headlines that are just nonstop?
I can honestly promise you I don't give it a single thought. I care, I can see that there are issues, but I can see that a lot of that is driven by the press too, and you just want to let a family be. And I gave it 20 years, so where we ended is 20 years from now, and I wouldn't want to go one step closer.
How good are all of you at gauging how something is going to land with an audience? And when was the last time that you were way off? I know, Fran, you were doing this like dark comedy, and sometimes with dark comedy, it can be too dark and not funny. Were there any instances where you worried that might happen?
The entire time. I'm not even joking. The entire time, I think the toughest part of this particular show was the tone, and not knowing how it would be metabolized and how people would react to it. I'll be honest and say I did a lot of rewriting where the show was sort of telling me what it wanted it to be versus what I thought it should be. I would write certain scripts, and for instance, toward the end of the season, it just felt very bleak with what I originally had there. And I was like, it's funny, right? It's like, this is funny. And no one was laughing, and Donald and Maya especially weren't laughing. And it just kind of felt all of a sudden, I mean, there are many beautiful films out there that are just about, heartbreak and how much that can just make you feel like you're ripping your heart out over and over again. But that's not what the show needed to be. So for instance, initially, there's a clip, there's like a short scene of John and Jane arguing in the woods. And they really go below the belt, and they're really pushing each other's buttons. That used to be an entire episode. It was just completely in the woods. I wanted to sort of make this almost Japanese-style horror film that was very much symbolically about the end of a relationship in this place where you can't see the forest through the trees and all of these things. It was far too dark. And so I realized that this is just sort of a bummer. And I thought, how can we fix this? Sarah Paulson. And So then it was an entire rewrite to sort of put it in this couples therapy office and make it instead about this way of them having to skirt the actual truth about them being assassins and having to lie through therapy, which is really counterintuitive of what you actually need to do in therapy, which is to be honest. And by way of that, found the comedy and sort of creating these missions to also laugh at the same time. But yeah, it was a doozy. It was a doozy at first.
Has anyone not seen the error of their ways and just been like, this is what we're doing, and it goes out in the world and it doesn't land the way you think it's going to? Could be an episode, a scene, anything.
What I faced, which I was perhaps naively not expecting, you know, you write a whodunit and you sprinkle clues carefully. So hopefully no one is going to put it together, but when their answer comes, they will look back and go like, oh, it was right there. You want that yummy experience of, I almost had it. What I was not expecting, and it's so silly of me, is the fact that people obsessed. True Detective is a beloved franchise. And number one, and number two, because HBO delivers episodes one a week, which at the beginning I was very upset because I wanted people to experience the whole sex. And then I really came to love the fact that people would watch one episode and think about it and obsess about it and talk to other people and go on social media and blog about it. And blog is an odd word, but they would make videos on TikTok about it. See, I know. And they would find, one of them would find something and another one would find something else. And they would piece together things that they were not supposed to piece because they would watch the episode 3 and 4 times. So my plan of being super smart and secretive about my very, ingenious things that you didn't really see didn't happen. People were catching on every little clue I left. They still didn't put the whole mystery together at the end, but some people got awfully, awfully close. And it was, for 6 weeks, I was biting my nails because I thought that it was going to be all over everywhere who the killer was.
Jonah, you're someone who's written in the past for the Reddit crowd. How did you navigate
I'm
it?
saying I'm not writing for them, but,
Well, no.
but with them.
With that?
No, we had a very similar experience on the first season of Westworld. I had been working in television for a couple of years at that point, but largely the idea with that first season of Westworld was to do a season-long mystery, which I hadn't really seen done quite in those terms, or a sort of a filmic style season-long reveal. And so we structured it exactly the same way that we structured the reveals in The Prestige or in Memento or any of these films, where you have to, I always thought you have to play fair with the audience. You can't just pull the rug out. You have to see these little things in there. But of course, on HBO, released weekly with people on Reddit devouring every little piece of it, they do put these things together. They're not consuming them all at once. We sort of realized after the fact that I think as fun as it was to see people savor every episode, and I think that's one of the things that's exciting about the weekly model, I think we actually would have had more fun binging that show and putting it all out there so that no one really felt ahead of anyone else.
Yeah.
And they still had fun with it. It was Netflix's whole contention is that spoilers don't matter. They get people more excited. I don't quite subscribe to that. Yeah, you have to be I think you have to be very careful. And I've sort of, for the most part, stopped dipping a toe in trying to understand. I think the conversation's actually got a little, for reasons that we were talking about earlier in terms of the overall architecture of the internet, the way things are going, I think the conversation's gone a little more negative and it's a little harder to look at what's out there.
Steve, you've said that you don't think about generating sympathy or empathy when you're writing your characters. And that seems like something that executives in this town wouldn't really like. They're really into likability, but clearly like you've made these like massive hits that people have really resonated with them. Like, when have you been challenged on your style of writing?
It's the only way that I know how to write, so it's not a big challenge. That's not the thing that I'm going for. I mean, some of the the great characters in literature are villains, and in many of the things that we make, the best character is the villain or villainous characters, and And in terms of the main characters, I just don't see why they, why sympathy has to be developed for them. The story is what's important to me, and the way the characters serve the story, and so I try to do them real. I'm sure they're all sort of some version of me, and try to put myself into that story, and just look at the behavior rather than trying to artificially create sympathy for a character.
There's a danger, isn't there, that if you try and make somebody likable, as in life, they just become more repellent. And you should just write honestly.
What's the passion pitch that you've taken out and just can't sell?
For a different project?
Yeah. Something that wasn't made that no one...
Oh my God, my personal math, and I've talked to many filmmakers and storytellers, is that for every project that gets made, depending on who you are and where you are in life, between 7 and 11 are not made. That's my calculation. I don't know if you guys are luckier than me or smarter in selling them, but so many of the projects that made me who I am as a storyteller, most of them are not made, and probably will never be made. And they feed with their corpses the tree of what I get to make, I think.
Yeah, it's true. We like see the successes. I've joked that I'm going to start posting on Instagram on all my passes because like we don't talk about that, and you don't see it, but all of us here can probably speak to, like you're saying, 7 to 10 projects that just never saw the light of day. And so then when you are lucky enough to be successful and get something on the air, sometimes I do want to be like, no, but there were so many no's on this path to like a
I'm
bigger
always trying to
yes.
convince other people to come to my place, open a bottle of Mascaro 10, and show to each other the pitches and the books and the videos and just for fun of the cadavers that we left behind.
You could open a library. I mean, we're in this period of serious belt tightening in Hollywood, and I was wondering who here thinks that they'd have problems getting the show that they made if they took it to market today. I mean, you've talked about how hard it is for comedy.
I think I would, yeah. I mean, I think we're incredibly lucky, and at HBO at Max, like our executives got it right away, and they're still there, and they still champion it. However, I think it is a really hard time to make comedy right now. There's like a real downsizing of the number of comedies that are on the air, and also the budget allotted to comedies. So I think that if we took out in 2024 a show that didn't have a star attached, because we didn't have anyone attached when we pitched it, and it was about 2 women talking, essentially, and one being a woman in her 70s, I think that was a hard sell at the time, and we were really lucky to get passionate executives who heard it and got it. But I think it would be really even much harder now, because I think comedy is not being as prioritized even as it was in 2019 when we pitched it.
For me, that's been my experience all along. They're all hard to get made, and what I don't know if somebody told me this or I just realized it at a certain point. At the end of the day, you have to convince one person. There's one person at that studio, and that's who has the ability to say yes. And if you can convince that one person, you're in good shape. I mean, that happened with the first movie I ever made was called Searching for Bobby Fischer, and Brandon Tartikoff, who was running the studio at that point, happened to like chess and kids, and he said yes, and he even said yes with, I don't even care if we don't make our money back. I want to make this movie. So if you can find that one person, you're in good shape.
It's the same contradiction, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you want to come up with an idea and a pitch that is instantly, connectable, and people think I can immediately see it. And at the same time, the things that we cheer and applaud the most are the things that defy all that process.
Exactly.
And so you're stuck. You're stuck because I think the audience is screaming out and hoping that we bring originality to the table, and yet sometimes the gateway to getting anything made at all is to be predictable, and so you have to fight that all the time. because I've got a lot of the things that I've written are terrible pitches. I mean, Frost Nixon's the worst pitch known to man, too. And you know, but what can you do? You know, I remember The Queen, the movie. People would say, "What are you working on at the moment?" I'd say, well, I'm writing a film about the relationship between the Queen and Prime Minister following the days of Diana's death. And people just stared in horror at what I just said and said, well, good luck with that. I can't wait to see that. You know? And so I've got a couple of really terrible ideas at the moment that I'm trying to get over the line. And, you know, I keep thinking I should come up with something that makes it sound more snappy. But yeah.
The yearning that I have for originality, and it's funny, first of all, I want to say, I feel like I got invited to the adult table at Thanksgiving when I'm like supposed to still be at the kids table right now. So this is like totally surreal for me and amazing. But I got very lucky with the fact that I had the Donald Glover card, because he's sort of known to be this guy that can get away with things with a little wink and a twinkle in his eye, and people sort of eat it up, right? So that was very fortunate for me. But you know, I'm a cinema-loving nerd who loves art films, and you know, I think Mikey and Nikki is like one of the greatest films ever made. I never imagined in a million years, as grateful as I am, that I would be writing Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a TV series. You know, and the movie's great. It's a lot of fun, but I turned myself into a balloon animal to be able to take that concept and take this IP, which is the thing that studios are comfortable, you know, putting out right now, and turn it into something that felt like it made sense for us as individuals and artists to write that. So I hope that we can get brave again as a society to sort of welcome originality back. I think we all really, really need it and want it.
That said, I was with the originator of the original movie yesterday for lunch.
He's wonderful.
He raved about
I
your
know,
show.
and he's
So,
he's a mensch, as we said. He's
He
the best.
raved.
We
were both raving about your show.
That's so sweet. Thank you.
Steve, I have to go back to the late Brandon Tartikoff saying, I don't care if we make money, because I feel like that's not something that executives today say very often. What's the most difficult or sort of depressing conversation you guys have had with a film or television executive in the last year?
In the last year.
In the last year. Well, I guess it would be more like the last 6 months, but
I said to one I said something sort of like, what are you guys looking for? And they said, hits. But they're not wrong. I think that is what they're looking for.
To tie both those questions together, I think we'd be challenged. We wouldn't be challenged in getting Fallout greenlit, but we might be challenged right now in getting Fallout made the way we made it. And we kind of felt, I mean, look, I'd started working in television 14, 15 years ago, right when things were getting interesting. But watching Dan and David take Game of Thrones and really inject the production values of a big ticket summer blockbuster into television was the thing that got me and Lisa very excited to make Westworld. And it felt like a door opened where you could tell the story in a long form way. You didn't have to confine yourself to that feature length, but you could do it with feature values, with cinematic values. And I think honestly, part of Fallout for me was trying to mount a robust defense of the idea that this level of production value, this level of, it's not the most expensive show they made, but it is, we shot it on film, we shot it on location, we built all the creatures. We really did it the right way, in my opinion. And I was desperate to see that window of opportunity not disappear from television. I didn't want to start shooting with digital cameras. I didn't want to start shooting back on green screen stages again. So you could sort of feel that momentum ebbing. Peter Roth once told me when I started my career in television, he said, it would gently remind me when I was trying to do more ambitious things on broadcast, he'd say, Jonah, TV is 2 close-ups and a good script. And it is, right? It is. You never want to stray too far from that as a foundational value. But I like the idea that TV can be everything that the movies can be as well.
Yeah, I felt that weight of responsibility, I think, because I'm not sure, that one would get the same commission or trust from network or whatever that I got with The Crown at the time. It just so happened to walk into a room at exactly the right time when Netflix were looking at a show with international reach. And I took the responsibility because I felt, God, this is the first time in my life where I've walked into the room with the right idea at the right time. I've walked into the wrong room so many times, clutching an idea that nobody wanted. And in this, but for once, the stars aligned. And I just thought, I can't screw this up. And I think we all suddenly thought this moment of where people were saying there's a golden age of television, well, you know that as soon as someone declares that, it's already ticking down to being over. and so I think everybody on the show was aware that this could be a unique moment, you know, for all of us to just sort of throw everything at it. And we knew that we had a long period of time, and it was a decade of my life. But I sort of thought that may never come again. And that's why I went all in. I didn't do anything else, nothing else. I didn't consider anything for a decade. You know, and that was all because you sort of thought, tick, 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 this will just be gone in a minute, and you'll be pitching ideas and people saying, we want hits, you know?
I think the moment I hear the word algorithms, my heart sinks just a little bit, you know. But it's we don't want to. Everybody sitting here, I'm sure, like we were dreamers in our own right, whether we want to admit that or not. So, you know, TV, it's not the same as cans of beans, you know, and treating it like a product that needs to get hawked in some way. So when it turns into that, or it starts to feel like that's how it's supposed to be thrown out to the world, your heart does sink just a little bit because you're like, but I just wanted to write, you know.
But I think that the question of who has a horrendous conversation in the last 6 months is possibly this is a table where incredibly fortunate people, because I feel exactly like you, like after many years of having the most horrendous conversations, and I have entire journals full of those to remember. We got to a moment, a place, a person, a moment, a place, and a person who allowed for it to happen. And in many of our cases, it was an IP. It was an IP. It was an IP.
Right.
It was not an IP, but it was the moment where it found a way.
Yeah.
And it allows us, and I believe every single one of us were able to make it the way we wanted. I'm very satisfied with how weird my show is. And there's a deep resistance to weirdness in the industry. And I got the leeway to be very weird.
You did it very well.
Thank you. I'm really good at weird. Thank you. So we've been very lucky very recently. And it's terrifying to start hearing again the hits and the algorithms and the who's going to watch the show and the who's your core audience and those types of things that, you know, just make me feel like sit down and cry.
I mean, you talk about IP, we have IP, True Life, IP, original idea.
I gotta start reading books.
No, but I mean, we know how IP helps sell something. We know how it gets people to watch, but how does it hurt? Like, what's the drawback of working with a known property and a known name?
I think if you look at the history of television, and I was just having a conversation the other day with someone who actually tallied it up, the vast majority of hits are original. The vast majority. It was one of the things that drew me to television in the first place. I've worked in the movie business for 10 years. I'd spent 4 years trying to write Interstellar for Steven Spielberg. Steven left Paramount. The project fell apart. I said, I know a guy. I want to get the movie made, but in the meantime, I can't spend 4 years trying to develop something original. At that time, the crisis in the film business was the same crisis we now face in television. And I went to television because of its emphasis on originality. At that point, you would take a broadcast pilot out. And that was my first show. It was an original concept. And it was an expectation. It was very unusual to have IP in television at that point. And so, it's a bit of a mix, a slightly bittersweet situation to have, to work on Fallout. Very, very proud of the show, but also I love the original, the idea. When we found with Fallout a way to kind of have both. It's based on IP, but it's, Geneva and Graham, our showrunners, our amazing showrunners, were able to tell their own story because of the nature of the IP that we sort of found. But I do think the lifeblood of television is originality.
you've all come a very long way in your careers, but there's got to be a lot of like bucket list stuff still. What's the professional call you dream of getting? Being it an offer to work on a property, a creative collaborator, an actor who wants to work with you? Who do you want when you get a blind call from someone? Who do you want it to be?
I want that phone call to come from me to the studio, you know? I want to be able to be the one saying, hey, I have an idea. And someone listening on the other side, for me particularly, because I've gotten calls, and I think all of us have gotten calls with, hey, the next, and you're like, no, but I have an idea. So I don't know, I feel that. That said, I did take True Detective. I was not expecting that call. Who calls for True Detective some Mexican that made a tiny horror movie? And I was like, are you sure? Like, Issa Lopez? Shit. Okay. That was a good call. And if another call comes with something that is so surprising that you can make it your own, then yes. But the traditional big packages, not for me. I don't get excited. I don't know anyone else.
I mean, I spent, I don't know, 25 years doing movies before I did any television. And in my mind, I'm still doing it. I mean, I'm taking what I know from movies and making long movies. I don't really feel like I'm in the television business. I know that the success of shows, true success is when they repeat, is when, you know, you can do multiple seasons of something. But I don't know how to do that. So all I can do is try to make something, you know, that I would do as a film, but they won't make it as a film. So somehow, you know, I'm going to make an 8-hour version of it. And I've been lucky. I've done it twice, but I'm no expert. Believe me, I'm still making movies.
A lot of people wanted a second season of The Night Of.
Yeah,
Me included.
But
Yeah.
then you've got to do it. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's hard to do one.
As we start to wind down, I'm wondering, what's the question that you'd love to never be asked again? And please don't say anything that I've asked you.
Well, we were talking earlier about projects that didn't quite make it. And I wound up accidentally, we've done too many of these panels. So last night I actually spilled the beans and explained that my brother and I spent the 6 months in which he couldn't sell Memento. It wasn't, no one wanted to buy it, no one wanted to do anything with it. And we spent 6 months writing an action comedy. And it's the one that got away. It's the one that got away, but maybe we'll get back to it someday.
I think I'm done answering how I feel about Nick Pizzolatto reacting badly to my series.
Fair enough.
Didn't ask that.
You didn't. I appreciated it.
My dad always asks, which character do you write for? And I don't want to hear that question anymore. Because you have to write for all of them.
Right.
You can't just write for
I
one.
asked you that once.
No, you did not. Well, we have a very father-daughter-like relationship, so that makes sense. Yeah.
Did that really happen?
Oh, yeah.
There's Dr. Wikipedia. Check it out.
I have on your show, I watched it and I was like, oh, did that really happen? You know, it did.
And it always did.
It looks like.
Yeah.
Steve, you got a deep catalog. Any questions?
No, I think it's the same. I think it's the same. I mean, the things that I did at the beginning were nonfiction, and that was a question that you would get a lot.
Yeah.
And my answer is yes, in some fashion, yes, and also that a 2-hour movie is not real life. It's like you if you start condensing story or combining characters, I don't think that's changing the the reality of the story, but it is a way. It's the only way that you can tell a story.
If you could trade places with anyone in Hollywood for one day, who would it be? Don't even have to explain why.
I would choose Donald Glover because here's the thing. So the other day he was very casually telling the story about when he worked on 30 Rock, and he was saying how when Tina Fey would get stressed out, she would say, you know, that Lorne Michaels would say, oh, just go relax, like go pick blueberries at my blueberry farm and take it easy. And she's like, I'm making your show. And I looked at him and I was like, Donald Glover, you're my Lorne. You know? And I think I would be Donald Glover. He has a wonderful family. He works really well with his brother. He's good at everything. He knows how to enjoy life. And he is a really lovely human being at the end of the day of it all. So I would be him.
Jonah?
I'm still working on the last question. I finally figured it out. I finally got it. One question I can retire forever. Why don't you have an English accent?
Oh, that's a good question.
Why doesn't Chris have an American accent? That's the real question.
Before we go, everyone, what's the last show or film you watched that made you deeply jealous?
Steve's.
No.
It is Steve's, I have to say. Like, but in the best possible way. Jealousy goes through. We have a thing in Mexico that we call good envy. There's bad envy and good envy.
Absolutely.
Bad envy will destroy you. Good envy is the one that you want that.
It inspires
That's
you.
But
really
it
good
wants you
description.
to, it makes you want to do better, right? So your show for me was a massive lesson in good envy. Like, when I grow up, I want to be able to make that show. It was insane, everything about it. So.
Thank you.
I was envious watching your show because
serious?
yeah.
Oh my
Big-
gosh, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All I imagine, because I've been dealing with quite repressed, polite British people for so long.
Right.
And I looked at your show and I thought, they're having so much fun blowing things up,
We did have a great time.
being sexy. I mean, none of these things happen in my world. And I was peering over the fence going, look how much fun they're having. And
Come over anytime, the water's fine, truly.
Steve, Jen?
I mean, the whole time I was watching your show, I kept thinking, how did she do this?
Oh my God,
Every,
this.
shot for shot, how did she do this?
Oh my God, that's amazing to hear. I
And
mean, I'm going to
I-
sleep so well tonight. Thank you.
I really want to ask you some questions about it because it was so. It wasn't going out in Alaska in the middle of the night and shooting for however months you shot that. So there must be a lot going on there, and I'm just curious how you did.
I mean, we have to get a beer. And I'm just going to say we should go for the mezcal, the pitching of old projects.
I love that idea.
Let's do it. Let's please do it.
Yeah, it's a funeral, a celebratory funeral.
It's a Mexican-Irish funeral for the departed shows. And then we can also go into how the hell did you... I have to say, I mean, it's every one of your shows, for real. I'm not bullshitting anybody. That episode of the guy that ends up in the Queen's bedroom is one of the best hours of TV I've ever seen. Because it's such a capture of the moment that England is going at that point. Everything is broken, and this guy is just, so many questions for all of you.
It's
so
incredible, yeah.
Let's go for it.
And we're not going to ask, did it happen?
Don't worry.
it did.
Well, I've never. It actually it pains me. I've got two young children, whom I love, with whom I cannot share any of my work, anything. My daughter finally watched Interstellar and got the twist very early on, which I'm kind of upset about. But otherwise, they're not watching The Prestige. They're not. No, they're definitely not that one. They're siblings. I want them to remain, have a functional relationship. The last thing that made me deeply jealous was Bluey. Because that show is absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant.
And it does that thing where my children laugh from beginning to end. They're 7 to 10 minutes. And my wife and I sit there and choke up half the time. Brilliant show.
Bluey's so good that I don't have children and I've seen it. That's how good Bluey is. Well, I think Anatomy of a Fall was the last thing I saw that I was truly deeply in love with and had good envy for. But one thing I'll say is that all these shows also, and particularly things that are IP or have real life fans attached, like I have a show that isn't based on IP, and when I have like 40 people on the internet mad at me, I freak out. And so there's I commend all of you because there's like a tremendous pressure that comes with taking on a beloved franchise or game or movie or, again, real life stories that people,
Family.
yeah, I mean, the highest stakes probably possible. And so I commend all of you because it is like so, for me, it's hard with a smaller fan base from a thing. Taking on that must be like an incredible challenge, and I hope you all have Xanax.
And I was going to say exactly, good medication, good medication.
Good medication, yeah, absolutely.
The good envy thing is a beautiful way to sort of describe it. I mean, I'm, again, also no bullshit. I really am an admirer of everybody sitting at this table. I will say, I'm going back to it, and maybe this makes me a psychopath, but I was like, that's how you get rid of a body. So I got to give it to you for that one. I mean,
And then he does it again.
and yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I have good envy of all of you, and I have a deep appreciation for you for coming today. Thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for watching. This has been great.
Thank you.